Welcome to episode 15 of the 3am Fear podcast. At the 3am Fear podcast, I have covered murder cases, strange mysteries, and even haunted places. But what happens when one wrong choice gets you killed? Life is unpredictable, and this episode is all about that. Getting together with your friends and family for an adventurous trip sounds exciting. But what if this trip turns into your worst nightmare? Before we head towards the episode, if you love listening to strange, mysterious, and scary stories, then please don't forget to hit the 5-star review button and join me every Tuesday as I deliver a new story. Today I'm going to narrate 2 stories. Stories of 2 separate groups who decided to go caving but never came back. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. Caving, also known as plunking in the United States and Canada, and which carries different titles around the world, is a recreational activity that has one exploring wild cave systems. Those who indulge in this form of activity usually prefer getting into small spaces with the hope of finding some underground tunnels or sometimes even more. These adventurous folks are called as plunkers. Adventurous people all over the world have been doing this for years, and there are specific caves that are open just for this activity. Usually, in some spaces that require a guide to help out, one is available. Some caves which are safe to explore are simply open to public and do not need any supervision. Although there are hundreds and thousands more that are left unexplored. The idea of exploring these caves sounds exciting. And if you are someone who carries this passion, then this is something that would excite you too. This episode covers 2 very tragic splunking incidents. One that occurred at the Nadi Padi cave and another that happened in a cave nearby. As with every fun activity, there are some risks associated with it. And because we are here on the 3am Fear podcast, that means something didn't go right. Not too far from the Nadi Padi cave, just on the other side of Utah Lake, 6 friends got together for an adventurous night. They wanted to discuss their next cave splunking plans. On 17 August 2005, 21-year-old Stephen Hunley was having dinner with 5 of his friends while discussing the legend of the secret cave near Brigham Young University. Supposedly in the back of this secret cave, a water tunnel led to a back room which was once a place for dark rituals and human sacrifice. There were several stories related to it, but no one thought it was true. Not until one of Stephen's friend, 21-year-old Jennifer, told them that not only was this cave real, but she had been there before. They of course didn't believe her at first, but then she went on to describe this cave. Her description seemed so real and enticing that they couldn't stop themselves from wanting to visit this cave. She said the cave was near the base of Y Mountain, just north of the 7 Peaks golf course on the edge of Provo. She further added that the cave entrance was a tiny gap between the limestone boulders. Because the entrance is so small, not a lot of people know about it. It is also said that you have to look carefully to find this entrance. As excitement filled the air, more details regarding the cave came up. Apparently, the cave entrance descends about 10 to 15 feet to the cave floor. Once you climb down, you have to hunch down because the ceiling of the cave is no more than 4 feet tall. You would also have to crouch down and walk about 100 feet to the back of the cave. The path would then lead you to a pool of dark water. After shining a flashlight down into the water, a small opening is visible at the bottom of the pool, just big enough for a grown person to fit through. I'll be posting some photos on how this cave actually looks like. This is basically a map of the cave. This is not pictures taken inside the cave, but just a map of the cave. Visit the link in the description to see the pictures of this cave. As far as Jennifer knew, not many people were aware of this cave, and so not many people knew how to actually get inside. She then added that whoever had been there before, they had first tied a rope from a rock on one side of the underwater tunnel and through the tunnel to the air pocket. This rope was then tied to some wood on the other side. This was to make sure that when you are down there, you can tug yourself back up. She told the group that she had been there before with another group of friends, and she said this was how she got to the other side. But the water was so cold that she had to quickly come back up and warm herself. By now, Steven and his group were excited. They weren't sure if this cave was real, but they definitely wanted to find out. They were adventurous, so why not? They jokingly named it the Cave of Death, but little did they know this was going to be true. So by now it's late at night, around 2 a.m., and the group is pumped. They want to immediately go and check out this cave. Steven had work the next day, and so he decided to stay back. The remaining 5 decided to head out to Y Mountain and check out this amazing cave. The 5 drove to the Seven Peaks Golf Course parking lot at the base of Y Mountain. They were wearing t-shirts and flip-flops. Jennifer had told them that the cave was not so far, and so they decided to walk up to the mountain. As they walked closer to the base of the mountain, Jennifer pointed out a cluster of boulders, just as she had described in her story. They shined their light into the hole and noticed about a 15-foot drop from the top. The group members were excited. They couldn't believe that they had found this amazing place. At around 4:30 a.m., the 5 squeezed between the boulders and made their way down into the cave. As they climbed down into the cave, 26-year-old Joseph Ferguson decided not to go with the group. He was a little nervous, and so he said that he would stay back and act as a lookout and wait for them. The group agreed and they headed into the cave, leaving him at the entrance. They clicked on their flashlights, crouched to the floor, and made their way through the 4-foot tunnel. Joseph got out of the cave and sat on one of the boulders near the entrance. The remaining made their way through the water. It had been almost an hour since the group had gone in, and Joseph was getting impatient. He was worried, and so he got off the boulder and looked down into the cave, hoping to hear or see something. Dead silence filled the air. He waited for another hour, and when he still didn't hear something, he knew that something was wrong. They couldn't be this late. He didn't want to go down on his own, and so he dialed 911. At 6:25 a.m., as the sun rose, Joseph was now scared for his friend's life. He was now certain that something had gone terribly wrong. As his fear rose, the police arrived. He told them everything about the previous night, from the discussion about the cave to the group getting in. The police were shocked because no one knew that the cave even existed in the first place. By the time he was done with the description, the police realized just how dangerous this cave could be, and so they immediately started sucking out the water from the cave with a pump. At the same time, they started pumping oxygen into the cave. Once they had removed about 6 inches of water, they crawled into the tunnel. They considered this to be a better option than holding their breath and swimming through the water. At about 9:30 a.m., they entered, which was almost 5 hours after the group had first entered the cave. 5 hours. The rescue team flashed their lights as they made their way through the cramped tunnel. As they crawled a bit deeper into the cave, they realized what had just happened. Joseph's worst nightmare had come true. Rescuers reached Jennifer's body at about halfway through. She was angled in such a way that it looked like she was swimming back from the air pocket, and the rest were following her. Investigators believed that the group was able to successfully swim through the tunnel for the first time and into the air pocket, which could hold about 8 people. There was plenty of air for them. They assumed that when the group decided to swim back to the entrance, Jennifer must have been the first, with the remaining following her. So while Jennifer was swimming back to the entrance, she must have hit her head or got stuck on something and drowned. The second swimmer, who was right behind her, had no idea because they were all in the water and it was pitch black. This person couldn't go through and so might have tried to go back, but unfortunately, the next person had come up behind them. Because the tunnel is so narrow and pitch black, it was not possible to swim side by side, and because of all the water, they couldn't communicate with each other. They were all blocked, with the person on the end unaware of what was happening in the front. They must have been thrashing and kicking, hoping that the last person in line would back out from their way. But it was too late. The darkness, the fear, the freezing cold water were all too much. In their last moments, each of them inhaled several gulps of water before drowning in the cold, dark cave. Their bodies were removed and the cave was forever sealed, and it was said to be too dangerous. The entrance is currently cemented, and since that tragedy, no one has been able to get in. Scott McDonald, 28, Blake Donner, 24, Jennifer Galbraith, 21, and Ariel Singer, 18, lost their lives to one adventure gone wrong. Since the tragedy in the cave of Y Mountain, Utah news outlets began questioning the safety of local cave systems. Authorities were on high alert, ensuring no such incident would ever occur again. But unfortunately, something did happen. John Edward Jones was a 26-year-old medical student at the University of Virginia. He visited the Nutty Putty Cave with his 23-year-old brother Josh on November 24, 2009. John was a very adventurous man and carried a desire to live a life to the fullest. He was happily married to a woman named Emily, and together they had a beautiful young daughter named Lizzie. To add to their happiness, Emily was now pregnant with their second child, who was due in June 2010. John was a devout Mormon and was on his way to becoming a podiatrist. Those who knew him said that he was a very kind man who loved his family and God. Being an adventurer, John loved spelunking, and his father often took him and his brother Josh on cave expeditions through Utah. Just before this particular Thanksgiving in November 2009, John and his brother Josh decided to go spelunking in the Nutty Putty Cave. It had been years since John had been inside the cave, and his body had changed a lot since then. He was no longer the small boy, but rather a 6-foot-tall, 200-pound man. His body would no longer permit him to enter small spaces or nooks and crannies, but this wouldn't stop him from trying. On this particular day, John had made the plan to find the birth canal tunnel despite the many drawbacks. Dozens of different rooms made up the cave system, and each was connected by narrow tunnels that stretched hundreds of feet. To give a brief idea of the Nutty Putty Cave, then it is a hypothermal cave located west of Utah Lake in Utah County. The cave is popular for its narrow passageways and has been closed to public since 2009, when a fatal incident took place, one that will be discussed here in this episode. The cave was first explored in 1960 by Dale Green. The name Nutty Putty is believed to relate to the soft, brown, putty-like texture of the clay found inside many of the tunnels in the cave. It contains 1400 feet of chutes and tunnels, and prior to its closure had been accessible via a narrow surface hole. The entrance of the Nutty Putty Cave measures only 1.8 meters across. The entrance also drops straight down from the surface to a depth of 4.6 meters. Once you are down in the cave, going deeper inside would mean passing a passageway that is less than 1 meter wide. Explorers would require to crawl through this tunnel, which is 6 meters long, to reach the rest of the cave. And this is not something that an amateur can do. You have to be a really experienced person to do this. The temperature inside the cave keeps dropping, and the deeper you go, the colder it gets. Some parts of the Nadi Patti cave have poetic names, such as the entrance is called the blowhole. This is because the entrance of the cave resembles a whale's blowhole. There is also another portion of the cave called the big side. This is because of the specific portion of the cave which is described as a wide angle of 45 degrees that the room possesses. The big side is also one of the biggest highlights of the cave. The cave sounds exciting, doesn't it? The brothers took some time to go through the map, and once they were ready, they began their descent into the Nadi Patti cave with a few other friends. For the first hour, everything seemed to be going great. It was just like their old times. The group then went into the largest room in the cave, known as the big side. After some time, John, Josh, and their 2 other friends wanted to find the birth canal. As they headed deeper into the cave, John kept searching for the small passage towards the end of the known cave system. The end of the system was a series of small corridors known as Vein Alley. Another area just next to the birth canal was Ed's Push. Many of these tunnels led to dead ends, but there were still few that were left unexplored. It had been a while since the cave was checked, and so the unreachable areas were left off the map, and the small tunnels at the end of the cave were too small for someone to fit in. But it's underground, and it was possible that these had opened up, but that was not easy to know. The map gave them an idea of what to do and what not to do. One of the most important rules in the map, rule number 4, stated that one should not squeeze into anything that they may not be able to squeeze out of. At around 9 p.m., John found a small hole which he thought was the birth canal. He looked into the hole, and although it looked small for him, he thought that maybe there was more into it than what meets the eye. He thought if he could go further in, then he could find some more areas to explore. From where John was looking, it did seem like the tunnel opened up further, just a bit more. But there was one problem. John wasn't where he thought he was. Different sources have different theories, but many believe that he was much further away from the location that he thought he was in. Some say he was already in the birth canal, but when he turned towards a small hole called the Scout Eater, which had one small hole leading to nowhere, then he got lost. Some others believe he missed the birth canal and crawled into a completely different hole. It was never verified where he actually was. Either ways, it is believed that wherever he was not in a place where a full-grown man could fit in. Now John kept pushing forward and wriggled his way into the small hole. It was about 10 by 18 inches small. Once he got his body inside the hole, it was too small for him to turn around. But this didn't stop him. He wanted to go further in, hoping there was some end to this hole. He worked his way through the tunnel using his hips, stomach, and fingers, inch by inch. But soon the walls around him became smaller and smaller. As he attempted to crawl further in, he realized he couldn't. He had reached his full capacity. He gave up and decided to go back and out of the hole he had just come in. But unfortunately, this was no longer an option. His body was stuck in the hole. He tried to breathe and make himself smaller, somehow squeeze himself out. But even this didn't work. He tried to calm himself and thought of any possible way to get himself out of there. It didn't take long for reality to sink in. He was stuck upside down in a small hole with blood rushing to his head, 100 feet below the surface and about 400 feet away from the cave's entrance. His brother, who was right behind him, tried to grab his feet and pull him out, but he had gone too far in and the cave wouldn't give in to him. After multiple attempts, he realized there was no way to get out on his own. Every time Josh attempted to pull him out, John would just slide a little further down. Now his current position was something like this. He was hanging upside down with one hand pinned underneath him and another hand was behind him. His feet could still move, but since he was upside down, he was slowly starting to lose feel on his feet. When they realized they were losing valuable time, Josh ran back towards the cave entrance to get help while his other friend stayed with John. John at this time began to pray to God to help him get out for the sake of his wife and his children. The first person to arrive to the scene was a woman named Susie Motola. Susie was a local rescue volunteer. When she heard about what happened to John, she immediately dropped everything and arrived at the Nutty Putty cave. It was now nearing midnight and 3 hours had passed since John was stuck in the cave. Susie was a small and agile climber, so she could easily reach him. Once she found him, the only thing she could see was his pair of black and blue running shoes. She spoke to him and he told her that he really wanted to get out of the cave. Over the next few hours, dozens of more rescuers arrived at the scene. They went through the map and discussed all possibilities and tried to come up with the best course of action to get him out. Many recommendations came along the way. Some suggested looping the cave wall to easily slip him out, but they were also scared that the loop would get him further into the cave. In the end, they decided to use a rescue rope that would pass through a series of climbing cams. Now, climbing cams are a type of protective gear that climbers use for hanging ropes. These are inserted through the cracks in the rock walls and expand so they stay put. Now, the plan was to put the ropes through the climbing cams and attach one end of the rope around John's feet while the rescue team pulled at the other end. They also drilled bolts into the walls and attached climbing carabiners to them. They also tried drilling out the rock wall that was surrounding John, but this plan didn't work. For one, the rock wall was extremely tough, and about an hour of drilling, they were only able to penetrate a few inches, which was pointless at that time. Also, the rescuers were reluctant to drill around John because they were afraid of what would happen, because they had no idea how he was stuck or in what position he was stuck in, and they didn't want to take a risk. They were afraid that if they drilled, they could potentially harm him. For the rescuers, all they could see were John's feet and his hand, which didn't give them a better idea or any idea at all regarding how he was positioned inside or how far down he was or what exactly was inside this hole. Through all these hours of research and planning, John tried to calm himself, telling himself that someone would get him out. But as precious time passed, the blood pulled into his head and his heart had to work twice as hard. Gravity plays a key role in helping the heart pump blood out of the brain and your feet. That's why it's great to stand up straight or take walks to keep your heart healthy. In John's condition, however, he was positioned in an upside-down way, which made it harder for his heart to pump blood. This added more stress to his heart, which was increasing with time. After failing to drill a wide hole in the tunnel, the rescue team rigged up the safety rope system of pulleys through the tunnel. It was a slow and painful process as the passageways were too small. Out of the many people who showed up, the team tried its best to get the smallest and most agile climbers to go down there. Once they were down there, they had to tie a rope around John's ankles, and the team would then pull as hard as they could to get him out. The plan seemed very straightforward and simple. At first, it seemed like everything was going well. It took them some time, but they were able to pull him up inch by inch. but the pressure of the ropes added tremendous pain to his legs, and so they had to pause between every few tugs. The team rested while John hung there. They lowered a two-way radio down to him so he could talk to his pregnant wife Emily. She was right there at the entrance, waiting for him. They spoke for a few moments where she comforted him and told him that everything would be all right. By this time, John had been stuck inside the cave for about 19 hours. Any other person in this position would have had an outburst of panic. John took a few deep breaths and calmed himself. The rescuers began making some progress, but as every minute passed, it became harder for John to breathe. It was not the lack of oxygen, but his internal organs which were now pressing hard against his lungs. The blood had pooled into his head, and with every passing second, he risked a ruptured blood vessel, fainting, or even blindness as there was so much pressure behind his eyes. With every passing hour, he risked losing his life. Anyone else in this place would have had a heart attack by now, especially after being stuck upside down for only about 10 minutes. But John was strong enough to survive hours in this position. By now, John was in this position for a whole day. The team continued to haul him up inch by inch, ensuring his safety. He was now high up, enough for him to make eye contact with one of the rescue members. The safety rope system seemed to be working, and even though it was a slow process, I can imagine looking at one of the rescue members and to be the happiest moment for him. He was stuck down there for hours, and now there was finally a glimmer of hope. He was going to be free. The rescuer asked John how he was doing, and he was surprisingly relaxed. He said that he couldn't believe he was there upside down and that his legs were killing him. There were 8 men at the other end of the pulley system pulling onto the rope. With every pull, John would let out a cry in agony, but there was no other way to get him out. People comforted him, telling him that it would be over and he was going to be free, just a little more. After every few tugs, the team took a small break and let John relax his feet before getting back to pull. When John first made eye contact with the rescue member, he smiled. The safety crew prepared for the 4th pull on the safety rope as they all pulled as hard as they could. But then, suddenly something went wrong. A loud snap caught their attention, followed by the rope losing its grip. The impact had the rescuer fall backwards and on the ground. John, on the other hand, slipped further into the hole. At the same time, a piece of metal came flying through the tunnel and hit one of the rescuers in the face. He fell to the ground unconscious. John's nightmare, which he thought was so close to ending, had now taken a dark turn. He was back to square one. Clouds of dust and darkness now filled the space where once John's legs clearly lay. It took a few minutes for the dust to settle before the rescuers went in to check on John. They noticed that the stone arch next to John's legs where they had tied the rope had shattered. The next closest cabin air that had been bolted into the clay wall had also broken free. The cave had been so popular for oozing clay walls that the same clay was the reason the rope system failed them. John was now much deeper into the cave than he had when they first started. All the work that the rescue team had put in over the past several hours had gone to waste. But they didn't give up. They started once again. One of the rescuers went ahead and called out to John, checking if he was all right or if he was hurt. Dead silence filled the air. John's body did not move, and all they could see were shoes. A couple of moments of silence, and they could hear shallow breathing coming from inside the tunnel. As moments passed, the breathing became more and more shallow. The rescuers knew that if they had to save John, they had to do it as soon as possible or it would be too late. There was no way to know if John was hit on the head or if he had sustained any injuries on his body or even if he was getting enough oxygen. Another man tried to lower himself into the tunnel to see if he could help John, but unfortunately he got stuck and immediately had to wriggle himself out. Luckily, he was not too in, and so it was not hard for him. Exhausted, he left the cave and a new rescuer replaced him. The rescuers decided that the best way to get him out was to drill another hole into the cave wall for the pulley system. But as time passed, they got no response from John. They called out to him, but his breathing was much quieter than before. This was until a few moments later when it completely stopped. A rescue doctor was sent down there to check. By now, John had been trapped in the cave for 27 hours. As the doctor inspected him the best that he could, he sadly pronounced John Edward Jones dead at midnight. His cause of death was cardiac arrest from the strain placed on his body. As the news of his death traveled up the cave entrance, his family was in shock. As devastated as they were, they thanked the rescue team for their work. About 137 rescuers had been present at the scene, working hard to get John out. They made their best efforts, but they couldn't get him out. After John's death, the authorities decided that it was impossible to get his body out, and it was also very dangerous. And so the decision went to the Utah County Sheriff's Office, who then said that the cave would be better off permanently closed. This with John's body still in it. The landowner and John's family agreed to permanently close the cave. They used explosives to collapse the ceiling above John's body and seal the cave with a concrete plug. John's body is now forever sealed inside the cave, and it now acts as his memorial. His family even placed a plaque near the entrance in his memory. John's plaque and his story is a warning to all cave explorers. Not everything is what it seems, especially with the underground. It may sound exciting, exploring something that no one has done before, finding places filled with the unknown. But this could also take a dark turn. John left behind a wife and 2 beautiful children. What once started as a fun activity took away his life and his family's happiness. I kind of feel happy, these are my words, and I kind of feel happy that they sealed off the Natti Patti cave, because there are a lot of adventure seekers out there. And there are a lot of people who want to go, who want to explore, and they feel like, yes, we can do it. There is actually no proper information on this cave. As I said during the start of this podcast, there is no actual information on what is down there or how many tunnels are down there or what is there in each of these tunnels. John was a qualified person. He had been splunking before, but one wrong turn and he lost his life. Utah has several caves for splunking, and these are safe caves where people can go, people can, enjoy their activity. But there are also ones that have not been explored. There are also those caves where people don't know what exactly is in there. Don't risk your life for one fun activity. If you love splunking, then go for it. But make sure you know where you're going. Do your research. Find out from a local guide everything you need to know. If you are not an experienced person, get an experienced person to come with you. Nothing, no adventure is more important than your life. A movie was made on John titled The Last Descent. It was released in 2016. I haven't watched it yet because researching this case was hard enough. If you would like to watch it and then check it out, then please do let me know what do you think. If you are listening to this on YouTube, then let me know in the comments. What do you think about the movie? Have you ever gone splunking? If you're planning to, then be safe out there. That's it for the day. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to follow me on social media, especially Instagram. The links are in my description box. You can also find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. If you love reading thrillers, you can now check out my free ebook available on my website. Once again, thank you so much for being here today and see you next week. Have a great week and stay safe out there.